Hello and welcome to the Giving Voice to Depression podcast, brought to you by Recovery.com, the best place to find mental health and addiction treatment for anyone, anywhere.
Each week, we profile a guest who shares openly about their mental health journey. They share because they understand that when people don't talk about their depression or other mental health conditions, those of us who do struggle with them can feel like we're the only ones, that there's something wrong with us and that no one understands. We understand.
I'm Terry McGuire, the creator and co-host of this podcast. You have my promise that we'll keep it real here. Depression is real, and we're not going to sugarcoat our discussions about it.
Hope is also real, and you'll get a dose of that here too. I'm Carly McCullough, a licensed social worker and educator, and Terry's daughter. We've both experienced depression and also support loved ones struggling with it. We're here to normalize talking about depression and mental health in our communities, as well as our families.
And to share real-world tested strategies that have worked for other people who have walked similar paths. Thanks for joining us. Hello, Carly.
Hi, Mom. Today, we're talking about something that a lot of people face, but may not discuss openly: living with both a mental health condition and a substance use disorder. It's what's known as a dual diagnosis.
It's really an important conversation because when we understand how these challenges intersect, we can better support those who are struggling. And for those of us going through it ourselves, hearing someone else's similar story can help us see other possibilities.
So we're grateful to have David Shamszad here to share his personal journey. David is giving his voice to depression, addiction, and ultimately, recovery.
Let me start by asking you how long it was between you having symptoms of bipolar disorder and you getting treatment for it or a diagnosis for it.
It was my very late teens was when symptoms started to show. And when I was hospitalized and ultimately diagnosed there, I was about 23, 24. So like 5 years.
So no going to a doctor, no being diagnosed, no prescriptions or anything before hospitalization. It had to get to that point before it got attention. You got attention.
Yeah. Because I was, I was drinking. I don't know if I prescribed that to myself.
Right.
So that probably doesn't count. But no, when I started experiencing symptoms, I was probably like sophomore or junior in college. And I started having like what I thought were mood swings. I didn't have any other like name for it, but I knew they weren't normal mood swings, right? I was like, something else is going on here. And it would just be like periods of time, like could be like a day or 2 days where like the simplest things felt insurmountable. Like that's one of the things I remember the most is like the simple stuff of like brushing your teeth, taking a shower, having a conversation with another human seemed freaking impossible.
So we're talking about the depression end here.
Yeah. And it was like, and I knew it wasn't, it's like, I knew it wasn't me. I knew it wasn't just me. I knew there was something else going on.
But that was a couple decades ago when there was even less attention paid to mental health.
I was like a dude in college. So it was like the idea of, hey, bro, I'm feeling pretty sad today. Something's going on. That wasn't like the kind of conversation that we would have. But I'd also have these days where I was through the roof. Like I was as happy as could be. And I was talking a mile a minute and stay up all night. Just like I just remember like the descriptions people had. It's like crazy. People say like, oh, you have like cocaine energy, but I didn't. that wasn't it. It was just like this little battery pack that I had. And I drink during those times too. It just made it that much more fun.
Those high energy times may have seemed fun in the moment, but they were actually manic episodes, which David says often had consequences, sometimes very serious ones. Both ends of his bipolar spectrum did.
But I was okay. I was functional. I had my routines and those kind of just kept me in bounds. But when I got out of college, in my early 20s, it just started to get worse and worse. really, really bad. And it wasn't like a day or two. It'd be like a week, maybe 2 weeks of feeling either just intensely manic. Could go for a couple weeks just barely sleeping, wanting to party all the time, spent all the money I had, like every credit card I had, just I could blow through them without thinking twice. It didn't bother me buying just whatever dumb shit I could think of. Fortunately, I didn't have high credit limits at that time, so I couldn't really dig that deep of a hole. But then I'd have, a kind of an equal and opposite reaction. I'd have a week or two where, yeah, I mean, the thoughts that I would have were literally scaring me.
Oh, yeah.
I started thinking about. I thought about dying a lot.
A manic phase that David considers a second turning point happened after a 2-week solo session as a camp counselor with little to no sleep. David says he had all the energy he needed to not only do the job, but to knock it out of the park.
I had no idea that I was running on less than fumes. Like really, I was out of my mind. And I got off that, and I was like, you know what? I still have all this energy left. I can't sleep. I need to go do something.
That something included a 50-mile bike ride, followed by running a 5-minute mile and taking a long jog back to camp, where he finally felt out of gas and peaceful. That feeling did not last.
I knew without a doubt that this is the worst day of my life. And I knew it within 30 seconds of being awake. And my eyes open on the couch, and I woke up completely petrified, like paralyzed in fear. And the thing that's really hard to explain to people, I think, about an episode, no matter how many times you've gone through it, when you're actually in it, like none of the perspective of hindsight is there at all. Like you really, you could go through 100 of them, and when you're in one, you really don't believe or remember that there's like a beginning, middle, and an end. It's just the other 99 times that it started and stopped, you just you don't believe that that'll happen. And in that moment, I certainly didn't.
David says he knew he shouldn't be alone, so he went to his boss, who notified the camp psychologist, who showed up just in time.
Just comes up behind me and tackles me from behind and puts me in a bear hug. And I was in his arms for like, it seemed like 10 seconds. And then I passed out.
Wow.
And I woke up. I woke up in the hospital, and he had taken me there and, you know, committed me. Um, and I was there for about 2 weeks. That was the beginning of like the next phase of knowing, I'm like, okay, it has a name, which was actually really comforting in a way. Like, because I thought I was losing my fucking mind. So I was like medicated. And I'm like, okay, I can take this medication. But I still couldn't actually talk to anybody about this. I was like, I did not have a voice to communicate this with.
Didn't have a voice because you wouldn't have known how to describe it, or because of shame or stigma or fear?
Fear and shame and stigma. Like, at that point in time, I was, I don't know, just like a young American male. And
Yeah.
I'd learned the stuff I'd learned. Like, we had no shame drinking ourselves unconscious, in college every night in our fraternity basements. Where I felt shame, and where I think a lot of people feel shame, is, yeah, in talking about something that's a vulnerability or a weakness, particularly one like that's invisible. It's not a broken arm that I can explain. Like, I was doing something masculine and aggressive and I broke my arm. That's fine. That's an injury that I'd be happy to tell someone about. But saying, understanding and communicating to my peers or anyone that I have an illness that like affects my mood, affects my state of
Brain.
mind. Yeah, that wasn't just something that I knew how to do. So I didn't.
A quick note. 2 of the major forms of bipolar disorder, formerly known as manic depression, are bipolar 1 and bipolar 2. Their difference really comes down to the intensity of the high moods. With bipolar 1, people experience full manic episodes. That means at least a week of a very elevated, energized, or irritable mood, so intense it can disrupt daily life, cause risky behavior, or even require hospitalization, as it did for David. Depressive episodes often happen too, but you only need one manic episode for the diagnosis. Bipolar 2 also has mood swings, but instead of full mania, it's hypomania, a milder upstate that's not as extreme or dangerous. What makes bipolar 2 especially tough is that the depressive episodes are often more frequent and can last longer. David left the hospital with a better understanding of all that, and with instructions to go to therapy, take and monitor his new medications.
And then the last thing was like drugs and alcohol. Like, those are not good. Those will make episodes worse. They can trigger episodes. And I'm like, okay, medication, yes, I'm in. Therapy, no. Drugs and alcohol, forget it. Like, I will continue to use those as needed. And
Which
then,
was still frequently, I assume.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like, it was the only thing that could quiet my mind enough to like actually sleep. And so that just became like a part of the daily routine.
And that wouldn't change until his next turning point, the night David went out drinking and woke up at home injured and covered in someone's blood.
And this night was unique in that, like, you always kind of remember something from a bender. Like, blacked out's a euphemism, right? And so I'm starting to get kind of scared. Like, what happened to me? This isn't like a couple little scrapes. Like, I'm really hurt.
And what happened to the other people or person? Yeah.
Right. And that's just it. And so then I started wondering how I got home. And I started I'm like, well, there's no way I drove home.
He had driven home across town in San Francisco on a busy weekend night.
As if I hadn't already had enough opportunities to figure this simple fact out. It finally hit me that morning. You're not just going to take yourself down, dude. You're going to destroy someone's world.
That very morning, he started an outpatient program at an addiction treatment center where a counselor looked him straight in the eyes and told him drinking was going to kill him.
And I believed her. It resonated. I had a disorder, a serious mental illness that I really was not only like not treating, like recklessly, making worse. I was addicted to alcohol. I just started to see everything clearly, finally.
With that clarity, David made a life-changing decision.
I decided that the thing I needed to do was tell everyone in my life what was going on and make a commitment, not just to myself, but to them, that I was going to stop drinking.
Replies with offers of support poured in. In a 3-day period, David went from waking up injured and terrified to what would be his last day of drinking. He is 10 years sober now and says the experience has been like removing handcuffs that had kept him from caring for himself.
It's like, what are you even treating? Are you treating bipolar disorder? Are you treating addiction? But like, taking that out of my life, now I could focus. I'm like, okay, I need therapy. Like, I need to figure out how to manage this thing. Like, I can keep taking mood stabilizers every day for the rest of my life, but I'm angry. I'm confused. I don't know why I have this. I don't really know what to do. I don't know how to make it. I don't know how to turn it into something I'm okay with and something that I eventually can see as a source of strength. It still feels like a mark of shame. So it was a matter of continually getting therapy. I mean, therapy is not always accessible. It can be expensive. I know that.
David describes the skills he's learned in therapy to those he learns in the gym. Both require patience, commitment, and reps.
In my case, when I feel like my mind is spiraling towards something that might be an episode, I know the playbook. And like, whether it's depression or PTSD or bipolar, there are tools, but you have to learn them and then you have to practice them. And it's very, very hard to do that if you're not taking care of yourself in the meantime. It's like, if I go to therapy and I've been drinking for 5 days and I feel all kinds of wretched, like, who is that therapist even talking to? Like, they're not talking to the person who's ready and engaged and wanting to learn how to make tomorrow better for himself. They're just dealing with a pile of just a hot mess.
One thing I want to know is, what would you have believed If you were listening to a podcast when you were in it, and I really am primarily talking about the mental health aspect of it, but I understand they were completely mixed together. What would you have believed then that you can say to somebody now?
Well, that's why I'm here with you right now. It's hoping that person listens and
But it's hard because you're saying some things that somebody like you and me here now understand and believe. I'm kind of asking about like, okay, so you're in it. Yeah. And you're thinking, these highs are wild and get me in trouble. And these lows are devastating and make me not even want to be alive. Mm-hmm. What does he believe?
Well, realistically, in the middle of all this, I wasn't going to read one story or hear one podcast or talk to one person that was going to just like open my eyes. Instead, I believe the best case scenario is all these things contribute. Somebody listening to a friend, somebody listening to your show, reading a book, going to AA to try it out. It's steady drops of the right message and a positive message of hope, of the possibility of recovery that kind of chip away at somebody's inability to believe that like they could do it too. Mm-hmm. So I guess what I would say is just like, you don't have to fix this today. You don't have to, you're not going to flip a switch. That the pressure of just turning everything around in one day that's not realistic. It's just let this in. Let this conversation in. Let a book in. Let someone help you. Let all that in. And if you allow that to happen and enough of it happens and you're vulnerable enough to start to listen, I think that eventually it can have the right effect. It's like by no means overnight, but if you let this message in and you let us and people like you and me let our voice in a little bit at a time, it'll help.
I'm so grateful for David talking about these little tiny drops of support, of hope, of connection, of access. Because I think when we are staring at something as overwhelming, intense, big seeming as something like a dual diagnosis where we're dealing with multiple things that are playing into each other. And I think as people who love people with dual diagnoses and who are struggling, it can feel like a lot of pressure to have all the answers, to know all the books, to have the answers, to say the right thing. And I think David's story and what he leaves us with is that it's an accumulation of droplets that actually end up making the difference, that end up sort of saturating in his experience, his story of support so that he could live in a different way.
It reminds me of a plant. If you've ever watered a really dry plant, if you pour water in, it goes straight through. But if you pour a little bit in and come back and pour a little bit more in, it can take it all in. And that sort of sounds like the same thing both you and David are describing.
Yeah, I think the term is that the soil becomes hydrophobic. It actually repels the water. And we're recording this in the summertime, and I've been growing basil this summer. And all of my basil looks pretty sad except for this one plant. And what I realized is it's directly underneath where the gutter leaks. And so every day it gets little drips. There's a lot of metaphors in nature and the natural world that help us understand what healing and health looks like. And it doesn't have to just come from a psychology textbook or something like that for us to understand how to support something. Supporting David, little by little, drip by drip, was nourishing in the same way that my basil plant is being nourished by the gutter water.
And when I asked him if he would have believed what he's saying now, and he said there probably wasn't a podcast, a book, a therapist, who was going to give him what he needed. But as we're discussing, if you just hear little truths little possible truths, even from enough different sources, it might just start to give you faith that something can change. And it certainly has for him.
And I might need a different message today than I do tomorrow. And I know that for folks working through sobriety, that it's sometimes a different thing that you need to access on different days in order to continue on that path.
Understood.
So one thing I do want to mention, David, early in your interview said, quote, "I don't know if I prescribe drinking to myself." And I think that that's something that we just always want to keep in mind, especially when we're thinking about things like dual diagnoses. When we're struggling with something, including depression or a mental health condition, could also just be stress, could also be anything, that there's lots of substances that a lot of us have access to quiet that, to numb that, to get temporary respite for it. And that for a lot of people, it is not necessarily poor character or whatever other things, assumptions we make about folks with addiction, whatever those really erroneous and painful messages are. But a lot of folks are using substances to try to cope with or manage either things that are happening inside their system or especially after some trauma. It's a coping strategy. And obviously for David, it evolved into something bigger than that. The other social norm that David brought up was that there was no shame around something like when he broke his arm. He described it as like masculine and aggressive, that would be fine for him to talk about with his friends.
Right.
But that when it was something around his mood, something internal, not that your bones aren't internal, but something sort of emotional, that he felt like that was going to sort of violate some sort of bro code of discussion, that we don't talk about that sort of stuff, but we can talk about how I tore my ACL because I was going so hard. Those are some other things that for us to think about of what type of pain are we making space to talk about? What types of injury, what types of struggles are we comfortable talking about with our friends, with our families, with our college roommates, with our colleagues, and which are things that we don't feel comfortable doing.
Mm-hmm. And just statistically, the number of other young men in his fraternity or wherever he was who were also experiencing mental health disorders is high. And maybe it would only take one to say what he said he couldn't say, which is, I'm in a really bad place. I need some support. And if someone were to do it, odds are, one of the reactions might be man up or whatever the hell they're afraid someone would say, but it might also be been there or I'm there too. Yeah. We can't know what the reaction's going to be until we give it a try, I think. But maybe that's really naive. Maybe there are going to be people who listen and say, oh, I know what the reaction would be.
When we speak with a lot of cruelty about people that we see as other or different, it makes it harder for us to bring out the things about ourselves that are other or different. And the more that we're speaking in non-judgmental or curious or open-minded ways, it makes it easier for the people that we care about in our orbit to be fuller versions of themselves with us. The only thing I'll add to that is I do think that a factor is the number of people that you're speaking with. That in general, folks tend to be more receptive to vulnerability in smaller groups, especially one-on-one. And so that would be the other suggestion. Mm-hmm. Group dynamics throw off a lot of things, and sometimes empathy can be the first one to go.
Understood. Good point. Thanks.
So thank you to David for so bravely and vulnerably sharing your story, especially around some of the conditions that come with a lot of stigma, including both bipolar and substance use disorders. So thank you so much for letting us in and trusting us with your story and trusting that we're going to receive it openly and with gratitude.
I should point out that David now runs a successful real estate and investment company. He has written the book, I Am Someone You Know. And if you want to learn more about David and or his journey, his website is his full name, David, D-A-V-I-D, Shamszad, SHAMSZAD.com.
We really hope that this discussion helps give some language or context to your own depression or ideas for how to support someone else in your life living with it. We invite you to check out the hundreds of episodes in our archive and to explore both the Resource Hub and treatment options on recovery.com. Depression is too dark a road to walk alone.
We'll be back next week.